Victoria, instruct us and yourself about the finesse of guitar playing.
Phil Manzanera, who's British Columbia, but not, I think, related to Mr. Portillo. He was lead guitarist with Roxy Music. He learned to play guitar by listening to his mother's Cuban records of folk music. He went to Dulwich College, where he formed his first band, Pooh and the Ostrich Feather.
I knew you were going to say that. I had a nightmare last night.
He joined Roxy Music in 1972, and the group had 10 #1 albums. He's since worked tirelessly as a songwriter, producer, and solo artist, and now has a new album out, Vozero. Phil, can you explain what Rolling Stone was on about when they said Phil Manzanera is one of the world's last psychedelic guitarists? Manzanera as a band leader is a sensitive collaborator, sort of Frank Zappa with humility.
Yes, I was worried when I saw you reading my...
Manzanera, I'm told.
Manzanera,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like the sherry.
Yeah, I started getting worried when I saw you reading my bio, and I thought, I actually haven't read it for ages, so I was wondering what it said.
I'm sure it's all true.
Manzanera. Yes, I actually learnt guitar from my mother in Havana. Which is for
You went to Cuba at the age of 6, is that right?
That's right. I was there during the Cuban Revolution. And
Fun, was it?
yeah, well, we lived opposite the chief of staff, the dictator, so there were a few gun battles from our house, and nights spent with my mother, who's a very nice Colombian lady, screaming, pushing our faces down on the floor, bullets flying everywhere. And so it was, yes,
Good
very
Lord, no
memorable
wonder when you made
experience.
money you went and moved to Surrey.
No, I'm in West London. No, England is such a wonderfully peaceful place compared to South America.
You were in South America through most of your young days, weren't you?
Yeah,
And it was very formative. I did read that you'd been deeply influenced by what I thought was the meringue, but it's the merengue.
Merengue. Cooking, yes. Well, if you have a Latin American mother and you get brought up in Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, and my brother's Argentinian, there's a whole other side to music, you know, and music in the late 50s and 60s in South America was very sexy and very rhythmic, and nothing like the Latin music that was heard over here. And, you know, that's why it took a long time for pop music and rock music to have any impact in South America, because they had their own very sexy
Perfectly
dance
good music.
which
Didn't
people
want
have
any
just
of ours.
discovered now in the rest of the world. And so it was very influential, absolutely. That's where you went out to dances. And
And there's quite a lot of that influence in this new album, isn't there? Shall we hear a bit?
Oh, yeah.
I think we have the technology.
Oh, that's...
Well, talk us through that one.
Well, actually, that's the only track that's a sort of hybrid. It's actually got some South African musicians on it, and because I went on a WOMAD tour, I was invited to play with a South African group this year. I played in South Africa and Australia and New Zealand. And I sampled a bit of them speaking, actually, in the Auckland Town Hall, and made a track out of it. It was a mixture of musicians from South Africa and Zimbabwe, actually. And it must be the first song that's ever been written that's got this collaboration of sort of South American and...
This is very sort of
Swahili.
cool and 90s, isn't it? I mean, it's a long way from Roxy Music, which was glittery suits and eyeliner. Well, you weren't it was Brian Eno's the eyeliner, wasn't it? I mean, I'd like to say that you're
Brian's,
a charming acid lime shirt today.
Yes, that's the remnants of psychedelia. Well, no, I you know, through South America and through living in England and everything, have been on a different journey to them, really. You know, that they were sort of...
Sartorial as well as musical.
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
You were described in The Guardian as Brian Eno was the eccentric one, and you were described as the competent one.
Competent?
Well, yes.
That's all right, it's not being competent. Well, you know, I guess people thought that I was sort of part of the musical element, you know, more than the sort of visual element.
Did it all end in tears? I mean, again in The Guardian it says, one by one,
Hardly,
Ferry
did it?
squeezed the most creative members out of the band. By the end, Roxy Music were as anonymous as the blandest American session musicians, proficient but flat in their playing, tasteful but dead in their songwriting, recycling their ideas like the cold air in their favoured international studios.
Yes, that's probably
Right,
true.
it's all
yeah.
true.
It's all true. Yeah. Well, I mean, bands start off, and everyone's friendly, and then after, it's a very unnatural thing to be in a band, and after a certain number of years, you just all get bored with each other, and then you get a life, and you say, oh, blimey, what are we doing? Playing.
I note that
bunch of guys.
I think last year you saw Ferry for the first time in 5 years. Is that right?
Was it 5 years or 20 years? I can't remember.
So from the tone in your voice, I slightly imagine that
Back in the knife box, Miss Sharp.
and they were talking about having a reunion. Is that going to happen?
Well, no, I'm always up for it. Absolutely. I think we have spoken about the fact that nobody seems to cover any of Roxy's songs, and what a shame. There's a body of work out there that doesn't get performed ever, and. You get to a certain age and you think, well, what a waste. There's about 100 songs there. No one else is playing them. Why don't we? So, I'm always, I'm always.
Why
up for
don't
it.
you? But I do rather agree with you. Again, you said
Perhaps I
that
could
you
take a
don't want to
vote.
have a 70s revival when you're 70. You're not nearly 70 yet,
No,
Phil. Thank you
exactly,
very much indeed.
What about
Thank you.
offloading a few on Holly, Phil?
Well, if you'd like to sing.
Are you excited by the idea, Holly?
It's that peculiar voice of Brian Ferry's that I think puts people off from covering his songs. It's not a traditional voice in many ways, and it's his vocal stylings that are strangely him.
Well, he's got a wonderful, unique voice, and so it's very difficult for people to cover those songs because they sound like someone taking him off. So I can understand that.
Right, splendid. Let's move on.